Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to this explainer of an absolutely incredible philosophical manifesto called The Duende of the Real Maravilloso. What we have here, it's not just a story, it's this profound mind-bending exploration of memory, survival, and a completely hidden pulse that connects humanity across centuries. Today, we're going to explore how a single, secret tree manages to connect a griot in West Africa, a revolutionary in Haiti, and a flamenco guitarist in Spain. It is a brilliant look at how rhythm itself can become a literal technology for survival. Right off the bat, you've got to understand a vital distinction the authors make. This is not magical realism. This manifesto isn't about, just sprinkling some magic onto reality to make a nice fairy tale. It's an explainer of the real Maravilloso, the marvelous real. This happens when history becomes so extreme, so horrific, that Western rationalism just snaps. Reality literally splits open to reveal the raw pulse underneath. And this entire concept, it's anchored by the unbelievable journey of a sacred 200-foot-tall fromager tree in Senegal, way back in the year 1758. Section 1. The Marvelous Real and a Burning Tree. We begin in 1758, in a Senegalese village with a man named Birane. He's a griot, which is essentially a traditional West African storyteller and a living vessel of memory. But then, a Portuguese slaver captain named Guilherme Fonseca arrives, and he makes this incredibly cold, mathematical calculation to just entirely break the villagers' spirit and eliminate their so-called superstitious attachment. To execute that brutal calculation, Fonseca deliberately burns their sacred, ancient fromager tree right to the ground, to destroy their landmarks. But here is exactly where the real Maravilloso kicks in. The tree didn't die. A tree that old, it doesn't die the way a person dies. It transforms. And the recurring anchor of this entire manifesto is this phrase, the wood remembers. The fromager's heartwood splintered into 3 distinct pieces that actually survived the fire. Each piece absorbed the tragedy, and each piece would go on to carry the memory of that village and that unbroken pulse across oceans and centuries. Section 2. Rhythm, Epistemology, and the Language of the Hold. Let's follow that splintered wood onto the sea, aboard a slave ship called the Nossa Senhora da Piedade. Here, captured people from totally different tribes are facing a dark, terrifying void where spoken language has just completely collapsed over a brutal 73-day journey. There were 243 souls trapped in that hold, and initially, the slavers' cold arithmetic was perfectly predicting this grim, geometric progression of death. But then something shifted. The curve flattened, the death rate slowed down. Why? Because of a collective pulse. Birane, chained down in the absolute dark, began to hum a rhythm. Soon, the entire hold was humming in shifts, creating a continuous, unbroken pulse that kept them tethered to their humanity, and most importantly, to each other. And they weren't just humming randomly. They were actively encoding their very existence. A woman named Aminata sang a 20-generation Fulani family tree. Husmanis sang a 16-generation warrior lineage. An Igbo woman sang a 12-generation blacksmith history. Birane listened to these whispered, nested genealogies, and by literally tapping his bleeding fingers onto the European oak shelf of the ship, he translated them. He turned these vast oral databases of human history into an unbreakable rhythmic memory system. Think about how we store data today. Well, for these survivors, rhythm became their epistemology, a completely invisible, pre-linguistic knowledge system that entirely bypassed European literacy. The captors heard the humming, sure, but they just thought it was animalistic noise. They were completely blind to the fact that rhythm was serving as an advanced, untraceable container for human memory. They could chain the physical body, but there was absolutely no way they could chain the pulse. Section 3. The Night World in Saint Dominique. The first piece of that heartwood survives the nightmare of the Middle Passage and lands in what we now know as Haiti, and it's about to become the beating heart of a revolution. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark divide of plantation life. Before it sparked an uprising, the wood started as just a simple support beam in an overseer's house until it was eventually carved into the handle of a sacred manjamin drum. On one side, you had this horrific day world, driven by the Enlightenment's systematized horror, the property ledgers, the boiling bagasse furnaces, and cruel overseers like a man named Claverie. But hidden away in the forest was the deeply spiritual night world. Here, rhythm, the ancestors, and the spirits, the Loa, ruled. In the day world, enslaved people like a man named Ézéchiel were treated as property. But in the night world, They were recognized as profound human beings. Before Birane died on that plantation at 73 years old, he did something absolutely vital. He taught a young girl named Maryse 17 specific rhythmic patterns on the drum. He didn't just teach her music, though. He essentially distributed his memories, the map of his homeland, and the history of his people into the physical bodies of hundreds of drummers across the island. He planted a seed of continuation that the plantation owners simply couldn't see. Section 4. Revolution Architecture at Bois Caiman. Fast forward to August 14, 1791. 300 enslaved people gather in secret. The ceremony is led by Bookman and Cecile, and right at the center sits Ézéchiel, playing the monoman drum made from our ancient fromager tree. During this very ceremony, they make a powerful blood covenant. A wooden bowl is filled with a sacrificed pig's blood. And according to the historical accounts, the wood of the bowl literally drank the blood. Everyone drinks from it, cementing a revolutionary network completely invisible to the French colonizers. As the manifesto says, the wood remembers in resonance. And that night, it resonated with the absolute certainty that they would be free or they would be dead. So the crucial point is how they actually coordinated all this. It wasn't through intercepted written letters or vulnerable human messengers. It was a rhythm network. Specific drum patterns functioned as an actionable, decentralized communication system. One pattern meant step 1, attack on August 21st. Another meant step 2, fires the weapon. Another meant step 3, meet at the crossroads. It was a highly organized military command structure encoded entirely in rhythm. On August 21st, the fire spreads across the island. And right here, the marvelous reel spectacularly takes over. In the sheer chaos, that cruel overseer Claverie corners Ézéchiel. Claverie aims his flintlock pistol point blank, and this is a perfectly functional pistol, mind you, and pulls the trigger. It misfires. He tries again. It misfires again. It completely defies Newtonian physics, because in that specific moment, the universe wasn't governed by Enlightenment mechanics. It was governed by the unbreakable pulse of a people refusing to die. Section 5, the unending pulse, and the concept of continuation. This unbelievable uprising eventually leads to Haitian independence on January 1st, 1804. But Maryse, the drummer, she realizes this really profound truth. Winning implies an ending. For them, true victory wasn't just a final step, it was continuation. So let's rapidly trace this unending pulse through the timeline of this wood. We saw it as the sacred fromager tree in Senegal in 1758. We saw it become the manman drum that sparked the Haitian Revolution in 1791. But eventually, the drum cracks. A fragment splinters off, is sold to a European collector, travels all the way back across the ocean, and ends up in the hands of a Romani woodworker in Granada, Spain, who crafts it into the soundboard of a guitar. Now we arrive in 1936, down in a cave in Granada. The woodworker's nephew, Mateo, is playing this guitar. His fingers are bleeding on the strings, just exactly as Birane's fingers bled on the ship's shelf and Ézéchiel's hands bled on the drum. Mateo thinks he's playing Andalusian Duende, the dark, beautiful force of flamenco. But his hands are actually channeling Birane's exact middle passage continuation pattern across 178 years. Now, what's really interesting about this whole concept is that it brings us to the ultimate thesis of this manifesto. Survival isn't about a single, finite victory against oppression. It's about an unbreakable, unending pulse connecting humanity across time, geography, and culture. Think about it. The griot, the revolutionary, and the flamenco guitarist never met, but they were all playing the exact same song of continuation. Which leaves us with a truly profound thought to wrap up on. We've seen how rhythm, whether as memory, as resistance, or as knowledge, can survive literal fire, cross oceans in the pitch dark, and span centuries. It really makes you wonder about the unseen forces shaping your own history. If memory lives in the resonance of wood and blood, what hidden rhythms are you carrying within you right now? Take a moment to listen for it.